Hi everyone, and welcome to this special festive bonus edition of The Strategic Leader with me, Gemma Bullivant, and my co-host, Fee Craig. It's the season of reflection and connection, so we thought we'd do something a little different from our usual episodes. So grab yourselves a mince pie or mulled wine or whatever drink takes your fancy, and join us as we take a moment to look back. We're going to be revealing a little bit about the backstory of the Strategic Leader podcast, how it all began, the highs and lows, and the lessons we've learned along the way. And because it wouldn't be the Strategic Leader without a nod to strategy, we'll also share how we approached all this from a strategic standpoint, or at least how we tried to do that. And we'll share some reflective coaching questions to help you think about your own year. Who knows, you might even uncover some gems of your own that you can carry forward into the new year. So settle in, get comfy, and enjoy this festive chat.
Ho, 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 ho. Merry Christmas!
Happy Christmas, Gem. Happy Christmas, everyone.
It's great to have you with us. We've got a festive special for you today. We're going to step away from our usual schedule and have a little bit of a look at the story of the podcast. This is our Christmas story, isn't it, Fee?
I think it makes it sound slightly more holy than it actually is. But yeah, this is our update on the year. I guess it's our progress report to each other. It's our performance, end of year performance review, as twere a chance for us to reflect on how far we've come. Because we started this podcast just at the end of last year. We're just over a year in. And we've had a year of podcasting, which I'm not sure that either of us particularly anticipated. So at this Christmas time, we're going to reflect on our story of the Strategic Leader podcast. And we're also going to just very loosely, very lightly offer up a kind of end of year review structure that you might notice, you might want to use at some point, or you could use just for yourself to reflect on the kind of year that you've had. So to kick off, Gem, where were we this time last year? What on earth were we doing?
Well, this time last year, I thought we'd had 3 episodes.
We started at the end of October, didn't we?
So way too soon for us to do anything like a review that we're doing now. But we had literally just got into the swing of it, really, hadn't we?
We had. It took us a few months to get started, didn't it? And you kicked off the whole idea. The whole idea came to you like a message from the Archangel Strategic Gabriel to tell you this is what's going to happen.
Yes, because I'd been mulling it over for quite some time before that. I had been doing the usual, I think I'd quite like to do a podcast, kicking out around an idea, going into it, stepping back from it. It all seemed a bit scary. It all seemed a bit big, going a little bit around and round in circles. And then one day I had a massive light bulb moment. And I thought, I'm going to ring Fee. See if Fee is up for doing this on a co-host basis. Because what I realised was that I wasn't quite comfortable with the going solo idea. And I wasn't quite comfortable with launching straight into interviewing loads of people. And I'm sure you've come across lots and lots of podcasts. I have. And I love lots and lots of podcasts that are interview styly. What was missing for me was something that was a little bit in the middle of those two, and a conversation style to share ideas, to explore things, to debate, come at things from different perspectives, and all of those good things. And so I gave you a call.
You did, but I think you'd done quite a lot of hard work before then, hadn't you? Because you had gone on the course to learn how to actually record and edit and publish a podcast.
Well, yes, now you're making that sound very, very structured and detailed. I downloaded a free online course and it was a few videos. It was a few kind of YouTube style things to take you on to the next lesson, all with a mind of pulling you into their hosting platform. And there's a few of them out there, but I must say it really did give me the kick that I needed to get rid of some of those prevailing voices on the shoulder. Mostly mine was around the tech What
Uh-huh.
microphone should I have? How on earth do you get from a conversation to a podcast out in the big wide world? And all of those things. But what it also did, which I probably would have got to in any case, but really helped to structure it, was help to think about exactly what kind of podcast it needed to be. Who was it for? What was it about? What did it need to be? And that was something that we also used, didn't we, when we started out in our planning.
Yeah, we did. So if we think about this as a little bit of a performance review, Jem, what would you say you are most proud of when you look back and think about all the things that you've done? What are you most proud of?
I am most proud of sticking to a regular set of episodes that has contained, I think, some really, really good strategic insights, strategic ideas, really helped to open up the conversation in the way that we wanted to. And that those episodes are out there and people are listening to them. I'm super proud of that.
Yeah, that's really similar for me. I am really proud of the fact that we've done it, the fact that
Yeah.
people listen every single week. So big shout out to you listeners for doing that. But I remember, do you remember that first day we looked at the numbers and recognized that 300 people were listening? And we were like giddy, weren't we? Because I think we'd never thought that anybody would listen at all.
Absolutely. I seem to remember one of the early episodes you mentioning that we might have more listeners than your husband and my husband.
Yes, and it was
And I think we do.
298 other people at that point. That was way back in the beginning of the year. So yeah, I'm really proud of the pattern that you and I got into to just keep doing it, because there were definitely moments where we, would have wobbled in terms of can I be asked, or in terms of is this any good,
Yeah.
or oh I'm just too busy, or I haven't got time to prep. We all have those wobbles in every project that we do, don't we? But just still showing up and still doing it, even if you
Yeah.
feel unprepared or you feel like it's maybe not terribly good, is I think it's something to be proud of, to be recognized and proud of.
And I remember you asking me really early on, we were sat around your kitchen table and we were doing some strategic planning and preparation.
It's strategic, Gem.
Yes, we had lots of post-it notes. And you asked me a question about what I wanted it to be in terms of an indicator of success, not necessarily what it should be in terms of the makeup and the purpose of the podcast, but actually how would I know if it had worked well? How would I know that it was successful? How would I define that? And I seem to remember saying something along the lines of that we've created something that I feel comfortable is of good quality.
Uh-huh.
Good quality from a production perspective within the limits of what we were going to do in that respect, but also good quality in terms of the content.
Well, I think I can speak to the quality element by sharing a moment I had maybe midway through the year. And my husband had a new company car and it was set up with his Spotify playlist. So it didn't automatically connect to my phone. It went straight to his. And I just ended up listening to whatever podcast he had on at that moment as I was driving along. And then that podcast ended and a new podcast began and the music came in and the introduction went in, and I wasn't paying a huge amount of attention. And then I went, do you know what? I really recognize this voice. This sounds like somebody I know. And I realized that it was you. It was you, Jem. You were introducing one of our very own episodes. And I had listened to the first 5 minutes of my own podcast without realizing it was me. And that had been hot on the heels on something like The Rest is Politics, or, some other kind of major podcast that I'd been listening to. And it was such a massive kind of jolt to me to go, oh my God. I'm not saying for a million years that we stack up against Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart, but just in terms of it not being obviously, it didn't go, oh, what's this amateur rubbish compared to that previous thing, was a really heartwarming moment for me, and a real surprise. Let's go to a next question. What has gone really well about this year? What would you say has gone really well about this year? That was a bit of a highlight for me. So
One of my big blockers was the tech. And I mean, I think we will both agree I do very much the heavy lifting on the tech side of things. By that, I mean, we haven't hired an audio engineer, we haven't hired any kind of technical expertise. We have been basically relying on my rapidly improving audio engineering skills and talents. I think that what I would say is something that has been a real success story from my perspective is the fact that it has worked from a technical perspective, despite several major hiccups along the way.
We did
That,
have the summer of the whirring laptop, didn't we?
oh God, yes, the summer of the whirring laptop etched deeply into my memory banks that. I still don't know why it whirred so much, actually. It wasn't even that hot this summer. I remember I bought a little vacuum cleaner and to reverse blow air onto the fan, and that kind of worked, and then it just stopped. And then we had that persistent Wi-Fi dropping episode, bad signal on both ends. We took it in turns to sound like we were talking from the deep end of a swimming pool, microphones that intermittently didn't work. I mean, you name it, we seem to have it. And all I would say is my audio engineering skills reached new heights, splitting and stitching audio. So I'm very grateful for that.
Well, I think that's really impressive. And I think if anybody is listening, because I do know a lot of people have a thought about setting up a podcast. And I think lots of people that I've spoken to have just been surprised that you can do it yourself. I mean, I guess you are blessed with patience. Well, you're not blessed with like unlimited qualities of patience, but you've got enough.
Oh, I think it's more dogged determination that comes in than patience.
Well, either way, the result is the same. So I guess it is worth noting if you want to set up a podcast, you don't need lots of kit. I mean, I have none. I have no kit whatsoever. I have a MacBook, and that's
Yes.
it. So it's, it's doable, isn't it? You don't, if we think about what maybe sometimes stands in the way of us doing things,
Yeah.
there's an assumption, oh, we need to have lots of kit. You don't. So what would you say? I mean, we've talked about a few sort of slightly hairy moments this year. What would you say has been your most difficult or challenging moment this year on the podcast?
There's two things for me. One I've already mentioned, which was, albeit I am very proud of overcoming the tech challenges.
Yes.
And so, the infamous episode of 20 plus stitches and various different edits that I had to do is very much in my mind. And I think the other main challenge for me has been figuring out the content for a particular episode. And you've helped me enormously with that, Fee, because I think I really would have got in my own way if I'd not had somebody to bounce ideas off. But when we sometimes just have a conversation about what we're going to talk about,
Yeah.
and then it evolves, and the way that conversations go, we're always anchoring it back to the key structure and framework that we've decided on, but just landing on two or three really useful things to talk about, one or two tips or models, and something to really think about, and we help each other to nail that when we're planning those episodes. I would have found that almost impossible to do on my own.
Well, likewise, I think I would have too. And I guess one of the hardest things for me has been to just kind of limit yourself to one or two ideas at a time. Because I think, we've just both come across so many different models, ideas, metaphors, nuggets of wisdom, some of which are useful and some of which are less, not so much. But it's quite easy to chuck them all in. And then thinking about, well, somebody listening to this is just going to be kind of overwhelmed or puzzled or confused by it. So just trying to curb your enthusiasm and just go with one or two has definitely been difficult for me. And I guess the other thing that I found, I mean, I still do find it quite weird, but it's not really uncomfortable anymore. But it definitely was at the beginning, was listening back to them and listening
Yeah.
back to myself. We all find listening to our own voice a bit weird, but listening back to myself, listening to how fast I talk, listening to the number of times I say and listening to how I construct things. There's so much to criticize when you listen to yourself, but equally, there's so much to learn from listening to yourself. And, we will know this from our coaching, training, and accreditation. You have to record yourself coaching sometimes. and critique yourself coaching sometimes. And that is a deeply painful process, but you learn so much from doing it. So there's very few opportunities, I think, in the workplace where you can actually objectively either watch or listen to yourself doing something
Mm.
as if it was somebody else and go, well, that bit was good. Actually, that bit was genuinely good. That bit would have been better if. So I did find it quite terrifying at the beginning. It was quite uncomfortable to hear myself, but a really powerful learning tool once you kind of get your head around it.
Well, I probably had immersion therapy because I had to listen to myself repeatedly to do the editing.
Yeah, you probably go, who are these two? Can they just shut up?
There were certain things that I learnt, and I learnt to spot in the edits. I have cut a few ums and ahs out, and my own, I hasten to add, but my main thing, especially at the start, I'm not finding this so much in more recent episodes, was a bit of a Darth Vader asthmatic intake of breath before I said something important or that I felt might be interesting or important. I cut out so much heavy breathing
Did
from the
you?
those have definitely gone, but I'm still guilty of lots of kind ofs and sort ofs. That I think is that's what I'm going to focus on next year. Having said all of that, I do think if we were to think about what we've learned, audio engineering skills to one side that I've already mentioned, more broadly, I do feel like I have become a little more articulate, or that I am more articulate than I ever thought I was when I listen back to myself and go, do you know what? You put that really well, Gemma. Well done.
And um, I think we really need to call out the fact that it's both okay to recognize those good bits in yourself, and it's also necessary. You know,
Yeah.
we are so, maybe it's a female thing, maybe it's everybody, but we're so kind of conditioned to beat ourselves up over things that we haven't done so well. And it's so important to recognize what you have done well and to, just enjoy recognizing it. Sometimes we're not very skilled at doing it at all. And it is really important to be able to say, do you know what? I did that really well. I'm really
Yeah.
happy with it.
Yeah.
So I would absolutely agree. And I think the biggest, what have I learnt so far is the fact that this stuff is possible. It's okay to go back to being a beginner.
Mm,
So, we're well into our careers and there's sort of an assumption that you know what you're doing in life. And we tend to assume that everybody else knows what they're doing. And so often we find out after the event that they didn't really know what they were doing, that they just got lucky or they just were winging it or it was just a really great shot. And actually, that's good enough. And I really have been encouraged by the fact that it seemed really terrifying at the beginning. It seemed like, well, how can we ever put together something that anybody would be vaguely interested in listening to? But we have, and people do listen to it because we can see from the numbers, and people do get in contact to say what they've taken from it, which is so heartwarming and lovely. And so that idea that what sometimes feels like us talking about stuff that we probably would have talked about anyway is worth sharing is a massive learning.
yes, yes. I mean, this podcast for us really is a living, breathing example of feel the fear and do it anyway, isn't it? We were very, very much the novice podcasters, and that's how
Yes,
I would describe myself still. But there we are. It was a scary old prospect, but we did it anyway.
we certainly did. And it's absolutely fine to build something in public, this notion that it has to be A1 tippity top from the beginning. And, we had many conversations about it's okay to put it out there because there won't be that many people listening at this point. So it's okay to make your mistakes because we don't have that many listeners in the first few episodes. So it's okay.
No, but our very, very first episode ever is our most downloaded episode, which we still don't really know whether that's because it's the best one, the most attractive one, or just it happens to be at the top of everybody's feed because we haven't quite figured all of that kind of stuff out. But I'm really proud of that first episode.
That's the one about 3 keys to being strategic, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like maybe it's that clickbait title. Maybe that's the thing that does it. 3,
Okay.
it's 3 things
Who
and you'll
knows?
instantly
Still
be.
learning this stuff, right? So what next, V?
Well, what next? That's a big question. Well, number one, I definitely want to carry on. I think it's been really good fun. We've had a huge number of laughs. And I've certainly recognised that I know more than I think I do, that I've got more to share than I give myself credit for. And sharing stuff has value to lots of people. So, put it out there in the spirit of, I'm not the world's most eminent expert, but I've probably got some useful thing to share. So definitely carry on. I think I would really like to explore kind of ways of making the thinking process a bit more efficient so that we can get more value. Maybe it's more around structure. So the value is communicated more efficiently for the listener. Something about that. I'm not quite sure what that looks like yet. And I think I'd like to bring in some other people. I know we have vaguely talked about this in the past, haven't we? I would like to bring in some other people because even though I'm a coach and you too, we spend big chunks of time asking people questions. Coaching is not interviewing. And I think that's a new skill that I would really like to explore. So there's that. And I guess another big stretch target for me is around promotion, is around how I promote this, because I've been a little bit under the radar this year with how I promote this for a variety of reasons. And I'm just getting into the swing of being bolder and more bullish about how I wave the flag for this podcast. So that's a big personal challenge for me next year, is how do I continue to do that and amplify that so it reaches more people. So that would be a what next for me. How about you? What do you see is coming next?
Well, I do echo all of that, and the bringing more people in, interviewing, that was one of the original thoughts that I had. I feel like I'm progressing to the next school uniform to maybe be ready for that.
Going up to big school,
Big school uniform to
long trousers.
to interview people. So yes, that's certainly something that we can explore. There was another idea that I had kicking around as well, was to really think about big, hairy strategic questions, those big
Mm.
nalas that often are kicked around, and to explore topics, but from a strategic standpoint, the things that are really getting some traction or getting some discussion or, causing us all to scratch our heads quite regularly. So I would like to explore some big, hairy strategic questions next year.
Well, I am well up for that. I love a big hairy strategic question. So and we recognize, we've used this metaphor many times, probably one of our favorite ones, getting off the dance floor and onto the balcony. So definitely in January we're going to be getting up onto that balcony and going, well, what is the future of the podcast? What do we need to do
Yes.
next? What are our goals and targets for it? So that idea of coming out of the regular rhythm of getting together on a Monday and recording something, and this is a completely separate conversation around what does the whole of the next year look like. So that's just a good discipline, isn't it? Before we wrap up our end of year review, I was just wanted to pull out a what went well, something that we did at the beginning that I think we did really well and I think is really applicable to pretty much any project you work on. And that was around the famous kitchen table. We had a conversation around our expectations of each other in terms of how much we anticipated the other person would contribute, or what we saw as our bit, what we saw as your bit, where there was scope for negotiation, which bit you definitely wanted to hang on to, which, where were our red lines, where were our deal breakers? And we had that conversation really early doors. Sometimes those conversations can be a bit awkward, particularly when you have a long-standing relationship already, because it's a very conscious reset of the relationship to a certain extent. And I think we did that really well. And I think it stood us in really good stead, because I think we've been very clear about, what we're expecting of each other. And I definitely think that's something we could all apply to many other situations.
Good shout. Good shout. And yes, we will revisit that, because that is something that we have been doing, is periodically revisiting the infamous kitchen table. I feel like we need to revisit it around the kitchen table again. I feel like the kitchen table is the anchor. Lovely.
So
Excellent.
I am thinking, just as a wrapping up, as a end of year appreciation. So we've talked a lot about appreciation in some of our episodes recently. Well, I think what I most appreciate with doing this with you is that it's a real thinking partnership. So sometimes we are totally thinking on the fly and creating stuff on the fly, and we're throwing thoughts into the mix, knowing that some of them won't float to the surface. And that's okay, because there's that degree of safety between us. So just to kind of appreciate you from me as an excellent thinking partner, co-host on the podcast for this year.
Well, thank you. And I truly appreciate your creativity. And I've said it before, but the way you inspire me to think about things in a different way or bring new, fresh ideas and perspectives to this podcast. So thank you, Fee.
Oh, and on that gorgeous, heartwarming note, is it about time we wrap up for Christmas?
Absolutely. Grab a mulled wine.
Indeed, mulled wine at the ready. Cheers across the airwaves, and we'll take a picture of our beautifully decked out Christmas offices and put it on LinkedIn for you. But thanks so much for listening this year, and we would very much look forward to picking up again for the end of season 3 in the new year.
Bye, everyone. Merry Christmas.
Bye. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas!